What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel. On nootropics, on testosterone, on using nutraceuticals, and whatever we have available to us within reason and that's legal to make us feel, perform, and function awesomely. I am your host, Ryan Michael Balla. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Hit the bell to get notified of all the content that I'm pumping out. You're better off just getting the YouTube app and subscribing, because then YouTube will literally notify you if we're live or if there is new content out. A couple products support this broadcast. I'll explain them at the end of this video, but super quickly, the two most primary of them are the Cortex stack. So we've got a nootropic stack, very powerful for mental energy. Been on the market for 8 years. I use it very frequently, and so do thousands of other people. Motivation, verbal fluency, mental energy. Secondarily, the most purchased nootropic stack on the internet, Torque. Again, I'll explain this at the end of this video. Links in the description below. Torque is 6 to 8 hours of energy. Think about that. Buy it at livecortex.com or down below in the description. Coupon code 15 now saves you 15% off of both of those nootropic products. Okay, friends. So I wanted to answer a question that came through in the channel from Silver Shroud 33 that asks the following. How long and at what dosage should we be using Fasoracetam for GABA upregulation? And does the upregulation last even after discontinuation? Okay, so I'll try to answer that question from my anecdotal perspective first, and then from the scientific perspective. Anecdotally, I have seen Fasoracetam change like people's propensity to approach women, people's propensity to be calm in like business meetings around like the boss and maybe some other seniors where they've got to give presentations, or in sales contexts or in other social contexts in 2 weeks. Okay. And sometimes like a little less, like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I've seen it be effective in these contexts in a very short period of time. And I've also seen in some of those people that after discontinuation of Fasoracetam, that effect lingers for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks max, but usually a week or two, indicating that, the GABA B receptors haven't been upregulated to a substantial extent, or that, they ultimately just need more use of Fasoracetam in order to achieve some sort of sustenance. And it's probably the case for a good degree of folks that they should maintenance use Fasoracetam kind of ongoingly, not necessarily every day, but perhaps 3 or 4 times a week or something, for the foreseeable future. So that's my anecdotal, right? But, switching to the scientific side of it, I think it's important to understand like what the GABA B receptors do and how upregulation actually works. So the GABA B receptors, effectively what they do is exert a sort of slow inhibitory control, like pumping the brakes over synaptic transmission and neuronal excitability, right? Basically your brain's propensity to fire neurons and be active at excessive levels. Now, usually GABA is targeting the slowing down of glutamate, right? And it's the ligand and its receptor binding. So that kind of slows down that, what may be triggering an anxiety response in people. But in other cases, look, too much acetylcholine could make you anxious. Not enough dopamine can make you anxious. And, who knows, downstream, they may actually just be having effects on glutamate. But GABA B receptors act to exert like this inhibitory control of that excessive neuronal function. So that's one of the primary purposes of the GABA B receptor. It's not that you bind to the receptor with Fasoracetam and that like calms you down or something. Like it's just more complex than that. You activate the GABA B receptor and then the GABA B receptor, through its control of other neuronal systems, tries to inhibit, excessive synaptic transmission and, neuron firing. So that's GABA B. Now, Fasoracetam, what Fasoracetam does, is actually a tandem approach to relieving anxiety. In the two neurotransmitter systems release, there are receptors that, largely underlie anxiety disorders, which are GABA and glutamate. And it actually works on both of them. So what it does on the GABA B receptor side is it does in fact upregulate them. And by the way, what upregulation means is not necessarily just like making current receptors work better, but it's actually making you make more receptors. You'll make your brain will synthesize more GABA B receptors as a result of continued usage of Fasoracetam. But at the same time, one of the major things that it's studied for, and a lot of people don't know this, is ADHD with hyperactivity. And usually in cases where there is some sort of genetic underpinning for an overexpression of the M-glu receptors, the metabotropic glutamate receptors. those are overactive in people with ADHD. And what Fasoracetam does is modulate them in a way which slows down their excessive function, as well as giving you more GABA B receptors, which again act as an inhibitory control system over glutamate. So you've got this tandem approach of making glutamate not fire as crazily, as well as pumping up the function of the inhibitory elements of the GABA B receptor. Now, just from a sciencey perspective, this is what's really interesting about Fasoracetam. It's actually unclear in the literature, and there is some pretty detailed literature on this. And in fact, I would point you to a paper called Fasoracetam in Adolescents with ADHD and Glutaminergic Gene Network Variants Disrupting mGlur Neurotransmitter Signaling, in which they essentially show you that what Fasoracetam is probably doing is actually activating the glutamate receptors, which you would think you wouldn't want to have happen. But as a byproduct, as sort of like a homeostatic response, then you have this activation of an upregulation of the GABA B receptors to sort of tend to, this activation of the glutamate receptors. That might be what's happening. It could be the case also that they're activating to glutamate receptors, or Fasoracetam is binding to glutamate receptors and essentially slowing them down, right? So that they're not as active when glutamate hits them, and therefore you get less of an anxiety response. That's not elucidated in the literature, so we don't actually know. I say that because the scientific answer for how long it will take to upregulate the GABA receptors kind of depends on that, right? And I'll explain to you why. If you're binding to the glutamate receptors in a way that's activating them, right? You're activating the glutamate receptors, then that will force an upregulation of GABA B probably faster, right? Because you have this process that's trying to go, hey, I've got a bunch of glutamate here, and glutamate activation, which typically tends to make you anxious or just not feel well, just unsettled or whatever. And then so as a homeostatic response, brain has to upregulate GABA receptors. If that's the case, it probably happens sooner than you think. And again, would line up with my anecdotals of it happening in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks max. But it's unclear at this time scientifically, and in terms of the research on this, because this has been studied pretty extensively, especially in ADHD hyperactivity individuals, how long and at what doses of Fasoracetam you need to be executing administration of it for it to make positive permanent changes in glutamate receptors and how GABA B receptors function, if at all. We actually do not know if the changes that take place in these receptors are permanent. We'll have you know that in a lot of the papers that try to study Fasoracetam specifically for ADHD hyperactivity, and again, that's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to tone down anxiety and tone the person's brain down in a way where they can actually focus and be measured and whatever. They were using between 200 and 800 milligrams of Fasoracetam. That's a lot. Typically we only take 20, 40, 60, 80 milligrams max. That doesn't mean that those lower doses won't work, but I'll just have you know that in the studies, as is the case with most studies on nootropic chemicals, they were using far higher doses. But if we were to glean anything from that particular study that I mentioned before about how long you should be taking Fasoracetam to achieve this, considering my reporting on my anecdotal experiences with clients, which is that they can take it for a couple weeks, have some pretty good responses, but then after a week or two, they kind of go back to baseline and they got to get back on Fasoracetam. This actually aligns with that, and I'll read that major part. It goes, we conclude that in adolescent patients with ADHD and mutations impacting the mGlur network genes, that's the metabotropic glutamate receptor network genes, NFC1, which is one of the names for Fasoracetam, is safe and well tolerated. Although the analysis of study efficacy is limited to early stage data, patients receiving NFC1 showed significant clinical improvement in ADHD symptoms as clinically assessed by global rating scales. So, we've got pretty solid proof, although you may not have ADHD, that Fasoracetam is pretty effective at toning down that excessive brain function, which does underlie your anxiety as well as ADHD. This is the important part. It goes, response occurred in a dose-related manner, minimally requiring 100 milligrams for significant effect. Okay. Now that doesn't mean, again, as I said, because I've seen this happen in much lower milligram quantities. Basically, what this means is that there is no answer in the literature, and I don't even have an answer in my own kind of consulting experience with people, of how long it will take to get permanent upregulation of GABA B and control over the glutamate receptors, if that's even possible, right? It may not be possible. It may just be the case that it's a treatment, right? It's just something to use to supplement with for your anxiety, to get you to function relatively normally in social contexts, or to ease the anxiety, or to get you relief from anxiety. And that only happens while you're taking Fasoracetam. Now, all of that said, and like I'm sure some of you are thinking like, oh, the 100 milligram dose. Let's kind of go back to that for just a second. My assessment would be, and looking at the literature and then also pairing that with my anecdotals with people, is that if you wanted any shot at permanent, fixing of that system, right? The modification of the glutamate system that is causing some of your anxiety, as well as the upregulation of the GABA B side of things, you would probably benefit from higher dosing more frequently. And by that, just throwing it out there, you'd be looking at 80 to 100 milligrams for many months. Like I would be shooting for 2 or 3 months or something. If this is a real issue for you and you've narrowed it down to glutamate GABA, and your anxiety is just intolerable, and you'd like to, execute something that you think will help, then yeah, I'd be taking 80 to 100 milligrams and I'd be dosing it for 2 to 4 months ultimately. And that isn't even really promising that you're going to have some sort of permanent upregulation of the GABA B receptors or regulation of glutamate receptors. It's just if you have any shot, that's your best shot of doing it. Hope that makes sense. Silver Shroud 33, thank you so much for the question. If you guys have questions, comment them and I will try to answer them here live in videos. And again, it always gives us, topics to talk about, that we can all kind of learn stuff from. So radical question. As I said, coupon code 15 now saves you money on the Cortex and the Torque Nootropic stacks. And we just dropped the price of Torque, and I'll get to that in just a second. Our 2 major nootropic products are the following. Cortex, look, 8 years on the market, like tested and proven for entrepreneurs, for productive people. If you're a person that wants brain fluidity, mental energy, motivation, productive drive, verbal fluency, take Cortex. It is an exceptionally powerful, time-tested, heavy hitting nootropic stack that's also very stimulant-like. The link to buy Cortex is in the description below. Your best option to get it would be to get it shipped to your doorstep every 30 days. You're going to get it cheaper, and then you get to really see over a 2 or 3 month period how positively it's affecting you and how you want to use it. Secondarily, Torque, which is 6 to 8 hours of hardcore mental energy, clean stimulation, motivation, and general cognition. Like if you want your cognitive faculties to be at 150%, buy Torque. And guess what, my friends? The price just dropped. So Torque just got cheaper, both on a monthly capacity, which is the best way to get Torque. Again, have it shipped to your doorstep every 30 days. Stop spending money on, your $9.99 Starbucks drink, or look through your bank. Like if you're worried about the subscription thing, find the things that are not serving you in a performance capacity and fucking remove them, my friends, and bring Torque into the mix. Both singular purchase and subscription just got cheaper at livecortex.com. And on top of that, if you'd like to try a singular bottle, use the coupon code 15 now. 15 now will save you 15% off your first order of the Torque nootropic stack. Powerful nootropic stacks at livecortex.com. Again, links in the description below. If you'd like my help on resolving anxiety, on building you nootropic stacks, on dialing your TRT protocol, and on fixing your energy, or all of those things, and anything else in between, hire me at livecortex.com. I am the world's foremost expert on facilitating excellent cognition, fixing really terrible, in some cases, underlying energy issues that prevent people from actually living their full lives and their best lives. I mean, look, when you get everything functioning and firing on all cylinders, your life will change. You're going to be way more productive. You're going to be a lot happier. You're going to be able to output a lot more. That fire blood, that zest for life comes back. That's what I love doing to people. Hire me, livecortex.com, and let's make it happen. We've got many different consulting plans, and you can check those out at the website. Appreciate you guys being with me. Awesome hanging out with you. Thank you so much for the question. More content to come this week, and we'll talk to you next time.